The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor, president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick of Ashburn, Georgia. The family of Miss Katie Bell Hardy Jackson of Plains, Georgia. The family of the infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Gregory Lee Williams Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of beloved church mother, Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy of Vienna, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran, Mr. Alfred Leon Finn of Rex, Georgia. The family of Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr. of Rochelle, Georgia. The family of Mr. Cedric Bernard Clark of Riverdale, Georgia. Would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick, age 84, of 122 Edsa Avenue, Ashburn, Georgia, died Sunday, January 23rd at Purity Health in Ashburn, Georgia. The memorial service for Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick, age 84, was held Sunday, January 30th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home portico in Cordele, Georgia. His beloved son-in-law, the Reverend Alan Ray Hunt, officiated. Survivors include his devoted companion, Miss Rachel Harrington of Ashburn, Georgia, his loving and devoted daughters, Mrs. Cheryl K. Hunt, and her husband, the Reverend Alan Ray Hunt of Suffolk, Virginia, Miss Juanita Kendrick of Hampton, Virginia, and Miss Clara K. Glover of Hampton, Georgia. His beloved stepson, Mr. Tracy Gullard of Bronx, New York. His loving and devoted grandchildren, Mr. Christopher Leonard and his wife, Mrs. Ebony Leonard, Mr. Roderick Hoggebrook and his wife, Mrs. Shambrella Hoggebrook, and Mr. Telvin Hoggebrook, all of Hampton, Virginia. Miss Victoria Glover of Hampton, Georgia. 4 beloved great-grandchildren, his loving and caring sisters, Mrs. Mary Kendrick Burroughs of Cordele, Georgia, and Mrs. Martha Kendrick Warren of Warner Robins, Georgia. A beloved goddaughter, Ms. Zakara Corey, his devoted niece, Miss Brenda Kendrick, and a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, neighbors, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick, age 84, of 122 Etzer Avenue, Ashburn, Georgia. Mrs. Katie Bell Hardy Jackson, age 78, of 118 Moon Street, Plains, Georgia, died Tuesday, January 25th, at the Piedmont Columbus Regional Hospital, Midtown, in Columbus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Katie Bell Hardy Jackson, age 78, was held Sunday, January 30th, at the Lebanon Cemetery in Plains, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Shirley Strouder, pastor of the St. John AME Church in Plains, Georgia, officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Elder designated Marcus Jackson of Marietta, Georgia, and Mr. Ralph Moses Jackson of Americus, Georgia. 4 beloved grandchildren, Miss Janetta Wallace, Miss Shantay Wallace, Miss Angela Wallace, and Miss Tiffany Wallace, all of Americus, Georgia. 3 beloved great-grandchildren, her loving and caring sisters, including a devoted sister, Mrs. Annie L. McGee, and her husband, Mr. Allen McGee of Columbus, Georgia, Miss Joanne Green of Americus, Georgia, and Miss Mary Ellen Davis of West Palm Beach, Florida. A beloved brother, Mr. Joe Kinchins III of Port St. Lucie, Florida. A devoted niece, Miss Cheryl Ford, and her husband, Mr. Calvert Ford of Phoenix City, Alabama. Her beloved godchildren, Miss Alexis McGee of Dallas, Texas, the Reverend Jeffrey Tullis and his wife, Mrs. Daphne Tullis of Ackworth, Georgia. Her devoted friends, Miss Helen Hogan, Miss Wanda Jordan, Mr. Chuck Hill, Miss Rusha Gardner, Miss Shalina Anthony, the Gardner Wakefield family, the St. John AME Church family of Plains, Georgia, and the Textron Collins and Ackman family. A host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Katie Bell Hardy Jackson, age 78, of 118 Moon Street, Plains, Georgia. The infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth of 120 Sun Valley Drive, Americus, Georgia, died Friday, January 28th, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The graveside funeral service for the infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth were held Wednesday, February 2nd, at the Eastview Cemetery, Babyland in Americus, Georgia. The Reverend Walter Jackson officiated. Survivors include his loving mother, Miss Quateria Brown, his loving grandparents, Miss Regina McCluster and Mr. Anthony Worth, all of Americus, Georgia. Mr. James Brown and his wife, Mrs. Betty Brown, his great-grandparents, Miss Jeannie McCluster, Richland, Georgia, Mr. Samuel McCluster of Columbus, Georgia, Mr. Ernest Brown of Leslie, Georgia, his aunts and uncle, Mr. Jacory McCluster, Mrs. Nikeria Gibson, Mr. Taekwon Gibson and his wife, Mrs. Kenesha Gibson, Mrs. Jasmine Brown, Mr. Nathan Hodges, Miss Chamara McCluster, Mr. James Brown Jr., Miss Adiana Brown, and Mr. Taquan Brown, all of Americus, Georgia, and a host of other relatives survived the infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth of 220 Sun Valley Drive, Americus, Georgia. Mr. Gregory Lee Williams, Sr., age 62, of 470 Gray Moss Road, DeSoto, Georgia, died Monday, January 31st, at the Wilson Hospice House in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Gregory Lee Williams, Sr., age 62, was held Thursday, February 3rd, graveside at the Sattler Cemetery in Lee County, Georgia. His pastor, the Reverend Lorenzo Mullen, pastor of the Antioch Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Katrina Mathis and her husband, Mr. Terrence Mathis of Leesburg, Georgia, Mr. Gregory Williams Jr. of Atlanta, Georgia, his treasured grandsons, Trenton and Tristan Mathis, both of Leesburg, Georgia, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Lois Daniels and her husband, Mr. Willie James Daniel, and Miss Mercy Glover and her husband, Mr. Albert Glover of Albany, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Deacon Lawrence Williams and his wife, Mrs. Gwendolyn Williams of Leslie, Georgia. Mr. Donnell Larimore and his wife, Mrs. Danny Larimore of Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Earl Guest and Mr. Greg Guest, both of Albany, Georgia. His beloved aunts and uncle, Miss Cadonia Johnson of Albany, Georgia, Mrs. Dorothy Daniels and her husband, Mr. Buford Daniels of Miami, Florida, Mr. O.C. Williams and Mr. John Berryhill and his wife, Mrs. Nancy Berryhill, both of DeSoto, Georgia. Mr. Charles Berryhill and his wife, Mrs. Martha Berryhill, and Mr. Gentle Hamilton, both of Miami, Florida. Mr. James Berryhill of St. Mary's, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive Mr. Gregory Lee Williams, Sr., age 62, of 470 Gray Moss Road, DeSoto, Georgia. Beloved church mother, Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram, age 97, of 316 Oak Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, January 28th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for beloved church mother, Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram, age 97, was held Friday, February 4th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Jeff Wilson, pastor of the Odom Grove Baptist Church, officiated. Her pastor, the Reverend Shannon Sowett, delivered the eulogy, pastor of the Spring Hill Baptist Church. The burial followed at the Spring Hill Church Cemetery. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Lily Mathis, Mrs. Nellie Shivers and her husband, Deacon Willie B. Shivers, Deacon Willie James Byram and his wife, Mrs. Willie Mae Byram, and Deacon Eddie Byram and his wife, Mrs. Louise Byram, all of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Cecil Byram Jr. of Titusville, Florida, Miss Ruth H. Felton of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Virginia Byram and her husband, Mr. Wayne Byram of Atlanta, Georgia. Mrs. Elizabeth Brown and her husband, Deacon Willie Frank Brown of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Joanne Barrett and her husband, Mr. Nelson Barrett of Ellenwood, Georgia. Mrs. Linda G. Rollins and her husband, Deacon Ray Rollins of Cordele, Georgia. And Mr. Bernard Byram and his wife, Mrs. Jelena Byram of Fort Mitchell, Alabama. 50 beloved and devoted grandchildren, to include a devoted granddaughter, Miss Easter Patrick of Cordele, Georgia. 109 beloved great-grandchildren, 93 great-great-grandchildren, 4 great-great-great-grandchildren, a beloved sister, Mrs. Nancy Bell of Cleveland, Ohio, a beloved brother, Mr. Lonnie Denard, and his wife, Mrs. Hattie Denard of Bear, Delaware. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, to include a devoted niece, Miss Annette Putman of Cordele, Georgia. A host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram, age 97, beloved church mother of the Spring Hill Baptist Church. Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy, age 66, of 324 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Wednesday, January 26, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy, age 66, was held Saturday, February 5th, graveside at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. His pastor, the Reverend Dr. Bobby G. West, pastor of the Bethel Baptist Church in Vienna, Georgia, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Cornelia Barnes and her husband, Mr. Andrew Barnes of Athens, Georgia, Minister Hilda Ray of Vienna, Georgia, his beloved and devoted brothers, Mr. Joe A. Bryant and his wife, Minister Ada Bryant of Kingsland, Georgia, Mr. Norman Bryant and his wife, Mrs. Lisa Bryant of Columbus, Georgia, and Deacon Ernie Bryant and his wife, Mrs. Lisa C. Bryant of Vienna, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy, age 66, of 324 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia. United States Army veteran, Mr. Alfred Leon Finn, age 62, of 3668 Fay Drive, Rex, Georgia, died Thursday, January 27th, at the Southern Regional Medical Center in Riverdale, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for United States Army veteran Mr. Alfred Leon Finn, age 62, was held Saturday, February 5th, graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Lonza M. Finn, a beloved daughter, Miss Delisha Finn, one grandson, two beloved brothers, Mr. Alvin Finn and Mr. Jonathan Finn, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Teresa Bess and her husband, Mr. Robin Bess, Mrs. Judith Lanier and her husband, Mr. Victor Lanier, and Miss Nicole Webb. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. United States Army veteran, Mr. Alfred Leon Finn, age 62, of 3668 Fay Drive, Rex, Georgia. Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr., age 42, of 312 Ashley Street, Rochelle, Georgia, died Monday, January 24th, at his residence in Rochelle, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr., age 42, was held Saturday, February 5th, graveside at the Piney Grove Cemetery in Rochelle, Georgia. The Reverend Timothy Barnes officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Miss Rosa Washington of Rochelle, Georgia, his loving fiancée, Miss Denise Holmes of Rochelle, Georgia, his loving daughter, Miss Aurora McKinney of Rochelle, Georgia, a beloved and devoted sister, Miss Latoya Emery of Fitzgerald, Georgia, Miss Ashley Washington of West Palm Beach, Florida, Miss Yolanda Emery of Fort Pierce, Florida, Miss Nichelle Emery Brown and her husband, Mr. Cato Brown of Fort Pierce, Florida, Miss Candace Emery of Orlando, Florida, his beloved brother, Mr. Terrence Emery of Fitzgerald, Georgia, Mr. Courtney Washington and his wife, Mrs. Daquita Washington, and Mr. Devin Washington, both of West Palm Beach, Florida. His beloved aunts and uncles, Miss Gracie Williams, Mr. Eugene Emery, and Mr. Albert Washington, both of Fort Pierce, Florida. Miss Norma Jean Emery, Miss Barbara Adams, and her husband, Mr. Glenn Adams, Mr. Billy Emery, Miss Mandy Emery, and Miss Dorothy Lee Emery, all of Rochelle, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins to include Miss Tasha McKinney of Rochelle, Georgia, and other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr., age 42, of 312 Ashley Street, Rochelle, Georgia. Mr. Cedric Bernard Clark, age 57, of 206 Heath Road Drive, Riverdale, Georgia, died Sunday, January 23rd, at the Fulton Center of Rehabilitation in Atlanta, Georgia. The remains were cremated. Survivors include a beloved son, Mr. Randall Tyson Clark of Riverdale, Georgia, his adored granddaughter, Lerale Van Putten Clark of Riverdale, Georgia, his loving and devoted mother, Miss Annie Ruth Clark of Springfield Gardens, New York, his beloved aunt, Mrs. Debbie Jean Lawton of Riverdale, Georgia, and Mrs. Lorraine Jackson Skipwith of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A host of cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Cedric Bernard Clark, age 57, of 206 Heath Road Drive, Riverdale, Georgia. Again, the family Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick of Ashburn, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Katie Bell Hardy Jackson of Plains, Georgia. The family of the infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Gregory Lee Williams Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of beloved church mother, Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy, of Vienna, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran, Mr. Alfred Leon Finn of Rex, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr. of Rochelle, Georgia. The family of Mr. Cedric Bernard Clark of Riverdale, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during the hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Director, serving Cordele and Vienna, were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Miss Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, of 1810 Richardson Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th at Adrian Health Navison in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Rotunda Harmon, Miss Molisha Harmon of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Akeisha Hunt of Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Centoria Hunt, Mr. Quentin Hunt, and Mr. Eric Hunt, all of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Mataria Westbrook and her husband, Mr. Broderick Westbrook of Atlanta, Georgia. 19 beloved grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, her loving sisters, Miss Clementine Hunt of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Mary E. Hunt of Ashburn, Georgia. Her beloved brother, Mr. Nathaniel Hunt, and his wife, Miss Lois Hunt of Lake Wales, Florida. Mr. Levester Hunt and his wife, Mrs. Deborah Hunt, and Mr. Larry Hunt, both of Cordele, Georgia. 14 beloved aunts, 16 uncles, a host of nieces and nephews, cousins, other relatives, and a multitude of friends survive Miss Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, of 1810 Richardson Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, will be held today, Sunday, February 6th at 12 noon at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Frankie Harmon, pastor of the New St. Stephen's Non-Denominational Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Westview Memorial Gardens in Ashburn, Georgia. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Romana Roberson, age 67, of 1863, Whitehall Forest Court, Decatur, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th, at his residence in Decatur, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Betty Roberson of Cordele, Georgia. 3 beloved children, Mr. Joseph Richard Roberson of Orlando, Florida, Miss Adria Beverly Roberson of Hinesville, Georgia, and Miss Tiara Jones of Fairburn, Georgia. 1 granddaughter, Two beloved brothers, Mr. Mulford Roberson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Valerie Roberson of Vienna, Georgia, and Mr. Ricky Roberson and his wife, Mrs. Melba Roberson of Lithonia, Georgia. Two beloved aunts, Mrs. Lorraine Pope of Detroit, Michigan, and Mrs. Annie Roberson of St. Petersburg, Florida. Two beloved uncles, Mr. Jerry Roberson of St. Petersburg, Florida, and Mr. Ulysses Marshall and his wife, Mrs. Brenda Marshall of Bowie, Maryland. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Romana Roberson, age 67, of 1923, Whitehall Forest Court, Decatur, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for Mr. Romana Roberson, age 67, will be held today, Sunday, February 6th, at 3:30 p.m. graveside at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, of 722 Stiles Robinson Road, DeSoto, Georgia, died Wednesday, February 2nd, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife of 58 years, Mrs. Mamie Sneed Robinson of DeSoto, Georgia. His devoted children, Mrs. Rosemary Jones and her husband, Mr. Calvin Jones of Leslie, Georgia. Mrs. Barbara Ann McDonald and her husband, Mr. Donnell McDonald of Charleston, South Carolina. Retired Army First Sergeant Arthur Lee Robinson Jr. and his wife, retired Army Sergeant First Class Sonia Robinson. Retired Air Force Senior Master Sergeant Anthony Robinson and his wife, retired Air Force Senior Master Sergeant Kimberly Robinson, both of Bon Air, Georgia. Mr. Christopher Robinson and his wife, Mrs. Kiana Robinson of McDonald, Georgia. Dr. Brooks Robinson of Lake Blackshield, Georgia. A beloved granddaughter raised as his own, Miss Brittany Blackman of Leesburg, Georgia. 10 loving and devoted grandchildren. His great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. His beloved sibling, Mr. Jeff Robinson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Marianne Robinson of Orlando, Florida. Mr. Clifford Robinson of Marietta, Georgia. Mr. Tommy Robinson Sr. of Tampa, Florida. And Mr. Jesse Robinson and his wife, Mrs. Rosa Robinson of Valdosta, Georgia. His beloved stepsister, Mrs. Carol Dydale of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved sisters-in-law, Mrs. Barbara Robinson of Albany, Georgia. Dr. Eutha Dydale of Locust Grove, Georgia. Mrs. Carrie Sneed of Atlanta, Georgia. Mrs. Nancy Sneed Clark of Leslie, Georgia. And Mrs. Martha Sneed of Americus, Georgia. His beloved brothers-in-law, Mr. Ernest Sneed of Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Willie C. Sneed of Ratcliffe, Kentucky. His beloved uncles, Mr. Charlie C. Sneed of DeSoto, Georgia, and Mr. Robert Sneed of Hartwell, Georgia. A beloved aunt, Mrs. Mildred Sneed of Leslie, Georgia. His New Beulah Baptist Church family, and a host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, friends, and family, including Mrs. Elizabeth Waters, Mrs. Alpine Sweet, Miss Sarah Robinson, Mrs. Ola Robinson, his devoted nephew, Mr. Tyrone Sneed, all survive. Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson, Sr., age 83, of 722 Star Robinson Road, DeSoto, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, will be held Wednesday, February 9th at 12 noon on the grounds of his beloved New Beulah Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The Reverend Lorenza Hurd will officiate. The eulogy will be delivered by his pastor, the Reverend Christopher Perry, pastor of the New Beulah Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The burial will follow at the Sue Walker Cemetery in Cobb, Georgia. The public walk-up viewing will be Tuesday, February 8th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, of 1424 Elbert Court, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, February 1st at the Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital North Campus in Albany, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Vernetta Regina Morgan of Cordele, Georgia. His loving and caring children, Mrs. Daquira Cutts Perry and her husband, Mr. Courtney Perry of Hampton, Georgia. Mrs. Adria Barthel of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Julian Glenn Sr. of Warner Robins, Georgia. 13 beloved grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Johnny Morgan, Mrs. Cora Lofton and her husband, Mr. Wayne Lofton, both of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Sonia Thornton of Warner Robins, Georgia, and Miss Janice Morgan Smith of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Deacon Michael Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Kamisha Morgan, Mr. Anthony Morgan, and Mr. Anthony Harris, all of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Patricia Robinson and her husband, Mr. Kelvin Robinson, Minister Gardner Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Beulah Morgan, Mr. Eddie Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Janetta Morgan, all of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Omi J. Blunt and her husband, Mr. Joseph Blunt of West Chapel, Florida. Mrs. Emma Collier and her husband, Mr. Charles Collier, and Mrs. Tommy Presley, both of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Omi Lee Ford of Vienna, Georgia. His beloved in-law, Miss Cynthia Bryant of Tucker, Georgia, Miss Judy Faye Williams and her husband, Mr. Clarence Williams of Konya, Georgia, Mrs. Patricia Sutton and her husband, Mr. Percy Sutton of Kathleen, Texas, Mrs. Jackie Smith of Cordele, Georgia, and the Reverend Leonard Boston and his wife, Mrs. Lucille Boston, and Mr. Terry Boston, both of Vienna, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, of 1424 Everett Court, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, will be held Saturday, February 12th, at 11 a.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public walk-up visitation will be Friday, February 11th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant, age 47, of 515 Southeast 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, died Thursday, January 27th at her residence in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Survivors include her loving and devoted father, Mr. Curtis Grant of Atlanta, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Mr. J. Schaefer of Tallahassee, Florida, Mr. Pedro Sano Jr., and Mr. Panzel Sano of Los Angeles, California, 20 beloved siblings, a host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, aunts, uncles, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include a special friend, Mr. Emmanuel Rollins of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Her special stepmother, Mrs. Shirley Trimble of Savannah, Georgia, survived. Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant Sano, age 47, of 515 East 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The funeral service for Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant Sano, age 47, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, age 57, of 4324 Industrial Boulevard, Arabi, Georgia, died Thursday, February 3rd at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his beloved stepchildren, Mr. Freddie Jones, Mr. Frazier Jones, Mr. John Jones, and Mr. Theo Smith, all of Ashburn, Georgia. Two beloved grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Beulah May Watkins and her husband, Mr. Billy Watkins of Tampa, Florida, Mrs. Helen Rogers and her husband, Deacon Jesse Rogers of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Johnny Ann Briggs and her husband, Mr. Isaac Briggs Jr. of Somerset, New Jersey, and Miss Tina Garrett and her husband, Mr. Henry Garrett of Raleigh, North Carolina. His beloved brothers, Mr. Willie B. Clark and his wife, Mrs. Cynthia Clark of Arabi, Georgia, Mr. Jerome Clark and Mr. Emmett Clark, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces, nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived. Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, age 57, of 4324 Industrial Boulevard, Arabi, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, age 57, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, February 4th at her residence in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Johnny Mae Jones, Miss Lucille Lawson, and Mr. Sammy Lawson and his wife, Mrs. Tommy Jean Lawson, all of Vienna, Georgia. 5 beloved grandchildren, a beloved sister, Mrs. Willie Mae Anderson of Unadilla, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams funeral directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning, and as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Ms. Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, of 1810 Richardson Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th at Atrium Health, Navison in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Ms. Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, will be held today, Sunday, February 6th at 12 noon at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Frankie Harmon, pastor of the New St. Stephen's non-denominational church, will officiate. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Romana Roberson, age 67, of 1923 Whitehall Forest Court, Decatur, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th at his residence in Decatur, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for Mr. Romana Roberson, age 67, will be held today, Sunday, February 6th at 3:30 p.m. graveside at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, of 722 Style Robinson Road, DeSoto, Georgia, died Wednesday, February 2nd at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, will be held Wednesday, February 9th at 12 noon on the grounds of his beloved New Beulah Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The Reverend Lorenzo Hurd will officiate. The eulogy will be delivered by his pastor, the Reverend Christopher Perry, pastor of the New Beulah Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The burial will follow at the Sue Walker Cemetery in Cobb, Georgia. The public walk-up viewing will be Tuesday, February 8th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, of 1424 Elbert Court, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, February 1st at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital North Campus in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, will be held Saturday, February 12th at 11 a.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public walk-up visitation will be Friday, February 11th from 1 until 6 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant, age 47, 515 Southeast 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, died Thursday, January 27th at her residence in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The funeral service for Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant, age 47, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, age 57, of 4324 Industrial Boulevard, Arabi, Georgia, died Thursday, February 3rd at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, age 57, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, February 4th at her residence in Vienna, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our program this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of Mr. Eddie B. Kendrick of Ashburn, Georgia. The family of Miss Katie Bell Hardy Jackson of Plains, Georgia. The family of the infant Carter Brown Hollingsworth of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Gregory Lee Williams Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram of Cordele, Georgia, beloved church mother of the Spring Hill Baptist Church. The family of Mr. Willie Lee Bryant Jr., better known as Billy Boy, of Vienna, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran Mr. Alfred Leon Finn of Rex, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Sammy Lee Emery Jr. of Rochelle, Georgia. The family of Mr. Cedric Bernard Clark of Riverdale, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Miss Vivian Diane Hunt of Cordele, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran Mr. Romana Roberson of Decatur, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia. The family of Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Kimberly Shantay Grant of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee-wee, of Arabi, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley of Vienna, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out, especially happy birthday to Mr. Cleveland Lemon, who celebrated his birthday Saturday, January 29th. Happy birthday to Miss Naisha Davis, who celebrated her birthday Tuesday, February 1st. And special birthday wishes goes out, 102nd birthday to our beloved mother, Mother Leela May Smith, better known as Miss Honey, church mother of the Zion Hope Baptist Church of Winona, Georgia. Celebrated her birthday Friday, February 4th, 102 years old. Dedication requested by our children, Miss Barbara, Elaine, Matthew, Otis Jr., and Ivory, and all of our great grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the members of the Zion Hope Baptist Church. Happy birthday, 102 years old, to Mother Leela May Smith, better known as Miss Honey, church mother of the Zion Hope Baptist Church. Happy birthday to Miss Minnie Ann Jackson, who celebrated her birthday Saturday, February 5th. Happy birthday to Mr. Wynn Jones, who will celebrate his birthday Monday, February 7th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Mary Taylor, who will celebrate her birthday Wednesday, February 9th. And happy birthday to our cousin, friend, and brother, the Reverend Christopher Perry, pastor of the New Beulah Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia, who is celebrating his birthday, says today, but dedication requested by Chairman Deacon Bobby Robinson, Church Secretary Sister Elizabeth Waters, Church Mother Mamie Robinson, and the entire New Beulah Baptist Church, to the Reverend Christopher Perry. Our dedication this morning goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, goes out to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker. This selection goes out to my mother-in-law, Miss Billy Ann Hall, and family, to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, and my sister, Miss Betty Mae Johnson, better known as Sister Girl, and Miss Patsy Jackson, and husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. My nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, pastor of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, and his wife, Sister Kathy Williams. And again, to each and every one who listens to our program on each Sunday morning, it's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. In your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.